Welcome to UNCANCELED Faith, a podcast that strives to break the culture of division which so often segregates believers from one another. We're your hosts, Joy Lucia Honeyball
and Hannah Rose Russell. We're so excited to have you here today. This podcast is brought to you by Inspire Truth.
Our mission at UNCANCELED Faith is to create a space for people to share how the Lord is calling them to live, bringing a new perspective on subjects that so often become a topic of division. This is not a place for debate, but a time to share testimony, dive into some controversies, learn from one another, and discover how the Father wants to encourage us in our faith journeys.
These episodes are recorded with a live Zoom audience. We also stream live on Facebook and YouTube, so be sure to subscribe to our channel for regular updates and the opportunity to join the Q&A at the end of each episode. Get ready, because Uncancelled Faith starts now.
This week, we are so excited to introduce our guest, the Christy and Carol Award-winning and ECPA bestselling author, Connilyn Cossette. Welcome to Uncancelled Faith. How are you doing today?
I am great. I am so excited to be here with you ladies today.
And we're so excited to have you. I know many people watching and listening will know who you are, but for those who have never heard about you or your incredible books, why don't we start by you just telling us a bit about yourself, where you come from, how you came to faith in Yeshua Jesus, and what made you want to become a writer?
Okay, well, that's a big order there. I'm the mom of two children. I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I've been writing since they were little itty bitty. And we live in Texas. We've actually lived all over the United States. We lived in North Carolina for a while, and Utah and Seattle. We're actually originally from Spokane, Washington. And I started writing because I had always been a reader. I'd always been interested in history. And I was kind of doing some of my own personal study into the history and culture of the Bible, and trying to understand the connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So I was just kind of listening to podcasts and just digging in for myself. And I started thinking about the Exodus and what was going on kind of in the background. And I was reading about the mixed multitude that goes up with the Hebrews out of the Exodus. And I started to get kind of curious about who this mixed multitude was and why they went with the Hebrews. And so it kind of snowballed from there, and a story popped into my head, and it wouldn't leave me alone. And I really didn't have a whole lot of faith in myself. I didn't have a whole lot of self-confidence. So I wrote a few chapters, and I thought, this is the most horrible thing that anybody has ever written, and nobody will ever want to read it. And I put it away, and it took me a few more months before we actually moved to Seattle for a year, and there was nothing to do except for I had little tiny children, and we were like completely broke, and it rains all the time in Seattle. And so I was stuck in the house, and I thought, well, what's it going to hurt to pull it out and try? And so I went to the library, got every book I could possibly get on writing. And I started to work on it, and ended up with a manuscript and entered it into a couple of contests, and it all kind of snowballed from there. So it wasn't something that I thought would ever become my life. I'm still kind of reeling from it, kind of pinching myself that it even is what it is. So God's been super good to me. And as for my faith journey, I grew up in a family with a mom and a grandma who are very, very strong in their faith. I would say I'm kind of a little bit like Timothy. And I actually went forward at a Billy Graham crusade when I was 6 years old. And I somehow ended up in front of a journalist who took my picture, and I ended up being on the front page of the newspaper the day that I accepted Jesus. And so that's really fun. I still have the newspaper. It was like Billy Graham, and then there's me in the dome. And so that's pretty fun kind of record of that day I went forward. So and then I was just discipled by my mom and my grandma over my lifetime. And went through some pretty big ups and downs. When I was 18, I kind of walked away from my faith, turned my back on the Lord, and turned my back on my family, and became a prodigal daughter. And so one of the books that I've written, Until the Mountains Fall, is a prodigal daughter story. And so there's a lot of kind of my emotions and feelings during that time within that book. So I've gotten to use some of that experience. But because my mama was on her knees for me just day in and day out, that period of wandering was a lot shorter than it could have been. And so the Lord got a hold of my heart, and ended up getting married and moved around and ended up writing. And here we are back again. So.
That's cool. It's really great to hear your story. I'm really inspired by how God essentially kind of threw you into this profession through just this story that wouldn't let you go. That's so inspiring.
I feel like the Lord kind of took me by the hand, because I had zero clue about publishing. I remember a friend of mine, I sent her the manuscript, and she said, well, you should do something with this. You need to get a literary agent. And I said, what's a literary agent? I had zero clue about the world of publishing and what it took. I'm actually a little bit glad that I didn't know, because I think it would have scared me.
I know, yeah. It's scary.
Yeah, so the Lord just kind of gave me light for the step I was on, and then I would move on to the next one, and then he would give me light for the next one. And, he took me by the hand, and he's been so good to me to just help me along and keep me grounded. And it blows my mind. Every day it blows my mind. And every time a new project comes up or something, it's just, God's so good. He's good. And I want it to be for his glory alone. So.
Amen. Absolutely. I think that's how I write too. Like, I will go and just get this inspiration to start writing. And I'm like, okay, this is just going to be a short story. And like 8 months later, it's now this whole book. And I'm like, okay, God. And every time I would sit down, I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know like what kind of writer you are, but for me, I don't plan anything, because I don't know myself. I just get this like little opening scene that I just start writing. And then every time I go to my computer, I just keep like the words just flow out of me until the story evolves and it becomes what it is. Then of course I have to like go through and like fix up all the messiness, because I've had no planning. But
so you're what we call a pantser, because you write by the seat of your pants. Yeah. And I used to be that way too. Like when I wrote Counted with the Stars, I had absolutely zero clue what it meant to plot or anything. So it kind of came out in more of an organic way for me. Now I have moved to where I'm what I call like a hybrid plotter pantser. So I do a general structure of the story, and I kind of plan out my chapters in a overall way. But within that, I kind of pants my scenes. So the way that I work has changed a lot over the years. And then I have plotting partners that I work with that help me build that story in the beginning, so that when I'm in those scenes, I don't have to struggle through the overall plot line. So it makes it a little easier.
It's from what I've heard of, some of my, other writer friends, it's a long process, and it can be, a lot to work through and to, stick with a long project, even with all of this. I'm really interested actually about your research process. I'm really interested in ancient Eastern culture, and just as a writer, you must do so much research into the cultures you're writing about. What is the most interesting thing, or something that's really stuck out to you when you've been researching the cultures you're writing about?
I think the biggest thing to me is, I think how advanced ancient people were. I think in my head, before I started really digging into ancient cultures, I thought they were very primitive. And I think that's an idea that we get from school and from, kind of an evolutionary mindset. But when you go back and start to look at the architecture and the jewelry making and the metalworking and I was reading recently that